For some criminals, a life sentence can be seen as an opportunity for redemption or making amends for their crimes. They may try to use their time in prison to educate themselves, develop new skills, or seek therapy to address the underlying issues that led them to commit their crimes. Some criminals may be completely unrepentant and maintain their innocence even after being convicted and sentenced to life in prison. Others may be devastated by the outcome and express remorse for their actions, particularly if they realize the gravity of the harm they have caused. Some may become angry or discouraged, while others accept their fate and try to make the best of their situation. Here are some of the most shocking reactions to life sentences in recent history. Dylann Roof. Dylann Roof is a name that will forever be associated with one of the most heinous and shocking crimes in recent American history. In 2015, Roof entered the Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church in Charleston, South Carolina, and opened fire, killing 9 African American parishioners in cold blood. The victims fell between the ages of 26 to 87 and included a beloved pastor and a librarian who had dedicated her life to helping others. Roof's motive for the attack was racially motivated, as he espoused white supremacist views and sought to start a race war. Roof's trial was a scene of high emotion and tension, as family members of the victims gave powerful and heart-wrenching statements about the impact of the crime on their lives. In the end, Roof was convicted of 33 counts, including 9 counts of murder and 3 counts of attempted murder, and was sentenced to death. Throughout the trial, Roof showed a little remorse for his actions, and even seemed to enjoy the pain and suffering he had caused. He made several racist statements in court, including a remark that he had to do it because somebody had to do something, because black people are killing white people every day on the streets. He also refused to allow his lawyers to present any evidence or testimony in his defense, insisting that he wanted to represent himself. Roof remained calm and expressionless when the sentence was handed down, showing no remorse or emotion. He seemed almost indifferent to his fate, as if he had already resigned himself to his life of incarceration and death row. The scene outside the courtroom was one of raw emotion, as family members of the victims wept and hugged each other while supporters of Roof's death sentence cheered and celebrated. The trial of Dylann Roof was a reminder of the terrible toll that violence can take on the ongoing struggle for justice and healing in America. Nikolas Cruz. Nikolas Cruz is a name that will forever be associated with one of the deadliest school shootings in American history. In February 2018, Cruz entered Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, armed with a semi-automatic rifle, and opened fire, killing 17 people and injuring 17 others. The victims included students, teachers, and coaches, many of whom had dedicated their lives to helping others and had bright futures. Cruz's trial was a scene of high tension and emotion, as survivors of the shooting and family members of the victims gave heartbreaking testimony about the effects of the crime on their individual lives. Cruz was ultimately convicted of 17 counts of murder and 17 counts of attempted murder, and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Cruz showed little remorse for his actions throughout the trial and often appeared detached from reality. He frequently smiled and giggled during court proceedings and, at one point, even drew hearts and smiley faces on pieces of paper, while a witness testified about the shooting. Cruz's behavior in court starkly contrasted the pain and suffering of the victims' families, who wept openly and expressed their anger and grief. Outside the courtroom, supporters of gun control and survivors of other mass shootings held vigils and protests, demanding that something be done to prevent such tragedies from happening again. The trial of Nikolas Cruz was a shocking reminder of the devastating toll that gun violence can take and the ongoing struggle to find solutions to this pressing issue in American society. Despite the conviction and sentencing of Cruz, the scars left by his horrific act of violence will take years to heal. Joseph DeAngelo. The trial of Joseph DeAngelo was a shocking reminder of the depths of human depravity and the devastating toll that such crimes can take on individuals and communities. Joseph DeAngelo, infamously called as the Golden State Killer, was one of American history's most prolific and shocking serial killers. Over several decades, DeAngelo committed at least 13 murders, 50 rapes, and over 100 burglaries across California. His crimes spanned from the 1970s to the mid-1980s, and for years he evaded capture, leaving a trail of terror and trauma in his wake. Finally, in 2018, after decades of investigation, DNA evidence linked DeAngelo to the crimes, and he was arrested and charged with multiple counts of murder and rape. In June 2020, DeAngelo pleaded guilty to 13 counts of murder and numerous other charges and was sentenced to life without parole. The scene in court, when D'Angelo's sentence was announced, has one of high emotion and tension, as survivors of his crimes and family members of the victims gave powerful testimony about the impact of his actions on their lives. Many spoke of the trauma and fear they had experienced for years, knowing that a serial killer still existed in their community. When the sentence was announced, D'Angelo remained calm and expressionless, showing no remorse or emotion. It was as if he was still living in the twisted reality he had created for himself, a world where he could commit unspeakable acts of violence without consequence. Brenton Tarrant. Brenton Tarrant is a name that will forever be associated with one of the deadliest mass shootings in New Zealand's history. On March 15, 2019, Tarrant entered 2 mosques in Christchurch and opened fire, killing 51 people and injuring dozens more. The victims were innocent worshippers, including men, women, and children, gathered for Friday prayers. Tarrant was a white supremacist who espoused extremist views and had planned the attack meticulously for months. In the aftermath of the shooting, he was arrested and charged with multiple counts of murder, attempted murder, and terrorism. When he was brought to trial, Tarrant showed little remorse for his actions and even seemed to revel in the attention that his crimes had garnered. During the proceedings, he made several hand gestures and references to white supremacist symbols and, at one point, even smirked at the camera in the courtroom. When Tarrant was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole, Tarrant remained defiant and unrepentant, refusing to speak or show any emotion. However, his victims and their families did not remain silent. Survivors of the shooting and family members of the victims gave powerful victim impact statements in court, detailing the physical and emotional toll that Tarrant's actions had taken on their lives. Many of the survivors expressed their anger and disbelief at the senseless violence that had been inflicted upon them. In contrast, others spoke of the long road to recovery ahead. Despite the horror and tragedy of the situation, there was also a sense of resilience and unity as the people of Christchurch came together to support one another and show that hate and violence would not tear them apart. The trial of Brenton Tarrant was a shocking reminder of the dangers of extremism and the need for greater efforts to combat hate speech and radicalization. While the scars of his crimes will never fully heal, the courage and strength of the survivors and their families serve as a reminder to the spirit and the power of a community in the face of tragedy. James Holmes. James Holmes is known for committing one of the deadliest mass shootings in American history. On July 20, 2012, he opened fire in a movie theater in Aurora, Colorado, during a midnight showing of The Dark Knight Rises. He killed 12 people and injured 70 others, many of them critically. Holmes was arrested and charged with 165 counts of murder and attempted murder, as well as other charges related to the shooting. He pleaded not guilty because of insanity, and a trial was held to determine his mental state at the time of the shooting. In 2015, Holmes was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Throughout the trial, Holmes showed little emotion or remorse for his actions. He sat quietly and showed no reaction as the guilty verdict was read. During the trial's sentencing phase, victims and their families were allowed to give impact statements. Some spoke of the physical and emotional trauma they had endured as a result of the shooting, while others expressed anger and frustration at the senselessness of the violence. Holmes chose not to speak during his trial phase, and his defense team argued that he was not legally responsible for his actions due to his mental illness. However, the jury ultimately found him guilty and sentenced him to life in prison. The Aurora shooting sent the country shockwaves and renewed debate about gun control and mental health treatment. While Holmes may be behind bars for the rest of his life, the impact of his actions will be felt for years to come by those who were affected by his senseless violence.